Security is hard, so let's assume we're probably gonna get pwned by noon. But if we all start to get the basics right, we might not fully get pwned until tonight.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the 7-Minute Security live stream. My name is Brian Johnson, and I'm your friend, and I'm your host. And in just a moment, I'm going to introduce you to my new friend, Stu from Ambient Consulting. Just to give you a little peek behind the wizard's curtain and be fully transparent, we're live, but we're not live. You know what I mean? I'm in my truck right now. Maybe you can see some of the green behind me. I'm vacating, and I'm going to be on the road when this stream actually hits the ether. So I know a lot of you have written in and said, "Hey, Brian, it's a terrible idea to podcast and drive." I'd say it's an even worse idea to live stream and drive. So we're not going to do that. So my new friend Stu and I, we got together about a week ago, and we just had a great chat, bashing some common misconceptions people have about working with recruiters. I certainly had those. And then I used one several years ago. It was one of my last kind of full-time gigs before starting 7MS. And it was a wonderful experience. If you get paired with the right recruiter, you ask the right questions, and you know what to look for. So when talking with Stu, we tackle some frequently asked questions like, how do you vet a recruiter who you don't know, but maybe they sprinkle a job invite into your LinkedIn box that you're actually interested in? What questions should you ask a potential recruiter to get a feel for their level of experience in the industry? Stu gives a great and humorous tip about if the recruiter doesn't even have a LinkedIn page, that's probably a red flag. We also tackle some resume tips, like finding the right length and tone for your resume, tailoring it to each individual job, highlighting your strengths. I ask about, do people still use cover letters for each, gig that they're applying to? And is a hobbies and interests section still a good idea on a resume? I've always thought it kind of shows a potential employer that, I am not just a robot that does IT and security things 24/7, but maybe that's kind of an old way that nobody follows anymore. And then we close with Stu by talking about some horror and or success stories from his years of experience in the exciting world of recruiting. So enjoy this interview. And of course, 7minsec.com has all the, things in the stuff. And check today's show notes on 7minsec.com to learn more about Stu, and reach out to him if you're an IT/security person looking for a gig and maybe you just haven't found the right recruiter yet. All right, I'm going to go keep my eyes on the road. Have a great week. Enjoy this interview, and we'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.
Brian, thanks for having me on your podcast. I am Stu Musil, VP of Delivery at Ambient Consulting. We are located in the Twin Cities, specifically in Minnetonka, Minnesota. I have been recruiting now for about 23 years in the industry. On the IT side, working a lot on a functional recruiting such as program project managers, and also on the technical side, which includes a lot of IT with security, development, architecture, et cetera. So I've seen a lot of things in my career, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about ambient and recruiting.
I'm excited to have you, and this is this topic is something we don't normally cover. So Stu, I've talked a lot with folks on the podcast about my own experience with working with recruiters, and kind of before we rolled, I gave you the example of how many years ago I used a recruiter for the first time, and I'm sure anybody who is going to see this or listen to this is and or has been hammered by recruiters who are like, hey Brian, I've got an intro Java developer job in Tallahassee. That's if you're willing to relocate, and it's $40K a year or whatever, and just what I mean, just spammed with that kind of stuff. And kind of but my one and really favorite recruiting success story is I finally started to write back to those a number of years ago when I wanted to get hardcore into hacking and penetration testing. And so I started replying to all of those with a little boilerplate that was basically like, yep, I just disregarded whatever you sent me. here's what I want. I want salary X. I want full remote. I want to do pen testing. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I would just blind reply. And I did that for like a course of like, 3 weeks. And then finally I got a call out of the blue, on my way home from work. And it's like, oh, hey, this is, Christy from so-and-so. I'm calling about, you basically your demands, your ransom note, and I was like, what are you talking about? Well, you wrote me and you said you want to, and I have that for you. And it was like, it ended up being like my favorite gig outside of the thing that I do now. And she met the list of demands, and I went off and got to do I got recruited and did a contract gig. But I think in general, and I'm saying in general, just because this is kind of the perception from my colleagues, is that we're all a little weary of working with a recruiter because we've received the spam, we've heard the horror stories, we've probably heard the worst of what you already know, which is all they're trying to do is make a nickel off your back, right? Like they're just going to try to get you to the job is posted for X, and they're going to try to get you to work for half of it, and then they're going to go retire in the in the Bahamas. So maybe we could start with just a little bit of like reality check / let's bash some of these, or let's whack-a-mole some of these maybe assumptions that people have about working with recruiters. I'm sure there's a lot of not so great ones out there, right? But maybe you could talk about like, what is it that you actually do and don't do as a recruiter, and maybe on a personal note, especially since you've been doing it for so many years, how do you show like, no, listen, I'm a level above some of this background noise, spam that you're getting, because if you're doing it this long, you're obviously doing a bunch of things right.
Well, and to put your theory to rest, I've been doing this 24 years, and I'm not living in the Bahamas, so I don't know where that comes from.
Okay, but you're still at it, right?
yeah, I'm still in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I think to that point, there are some recruiters that are very junior, right, and they're trying to go after anybody and anybody that will respond. My experience has always been to build a relationship with that candidate, and vice versa. If you're a candidate out there looking for a job and a recruiter reaches out to you, do your research, first of all, on the company. Where are they located? Do they have a good track record? Go on their website, etc. What do they do? Second of all, if it's a close match, respond to that person, but build that relationship. That's the biggest thing. And we talk about it with our clients too. We, as salespeople, our sales team, they build a relationship with our clients, and those clients come back to us. Why? Because we deliver good people. On the reverse side, and the recruiting side, we want to build good relationships with candidates and consultants. A lot of our consultants, when a job comes out, we go to their network and say, hey, you know what, Brian, I have this awesome job. Do you know anybody? We've treated you well. We've done a great job working with you, etc. We've proven that we are who we say we are and what we do, and we stand behind it. So there are a lot of junior recruiters out there that just blast, right? And we may talk about later, but a lot of AI stuff, they're just blasting. Who's going to respond? Who's going to respond? That's all great, but it gets frustrating to the candidate. We know that. The team that we have here at Ambient, we are what I call quote unquote veterans of the industry. We've been doing this a long time. So when we get a job or we get a project, we look at who do we know from our years of doing this, and we take a targeted approach to it. We don't want to be spraying our clients with a bunch of resumes. We want to send the best 2 or 3. So I'll sit on the phone, or a recruiter sit on the phone, or a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, and meet with Brian, get to know you. What are you looking for? What has been your experience? Hey, here's what we have. Do you think it's a good fit based on what we're telling you? And a lot of times with what we have here at Ambient and our projects and our positions that we have direct contact with those hiring managers. Those hiring managers are contacting us, where we sit with the hiring manager and say, okay, great job description. What are you really looking for? And, I think one of the questions that came up earlier is, a recruiter, they're just looking to make a buck, et cetera. We're an extension of your job search, right? Whether you're looking for a permanent position or a contract to hire, we're here to help you. And if we do our good work and do our due diligence and put you in a project that's exciting and new, a lot of people respond to that. Is there times where stuff doesn't match up? Sure, that's fine. But we want to make sure that we are building relationships over time. This is not just a transactional thing. We want to make sure that we're having you go into new projects, exciting projects that you want to do. When it comes to, making a dime, you know what? The clients are coming to us saying, hey, we need some help. How can you help us? Right. So our priorities are the clients and the consultants. If we don't have those, we don't have a business. Right. So it's treating the clients with respect and the consultants and our candidates with respect. But if as a candidate, if you go into it and it just doesn't feel right, if you it's like, Jesus, my gut tells me this is not, then it's probably not. Right. If you're not having a conversation like we're having right now, it's probably not a good fit. So just be, if you're going to, if any candidates, have an opportunity to go talk to recruiters, talk to them, and you'll know within the first few minutes if they're a good recruiter or not. But we're here to help you because we can sell your skill set to that client where, if you just submit your resume, it may go into a dark hole, right? You don't know where that's going, who's going to respond, et cetera.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And I mean, that's the, were I ever to look for another gig again, that's exactly the kind of relationship I would want was not, hey, I have this position, let me cram you into it. It's more like, hey, here's something that might match, but let's have a conversation about it. And to the question too, on the whole, getting dinged for like, oh, that you're just trying to make a buck. It's like, I think it's a very valuable service. And maybe this is a bad comparison, but I think what jumps to mind for me is like having a realtor work with you to sell your house. It's like, can you go completely on your own, cut them out of it, right? And do the prep and do the transaction and do all that stuff yourself? You could, but for somebody like me, like I love the idea that someone who's super experienced, has a huge network, right? Knows a lot of realtors, knows a lot of people, right? Kind of like you're saying, right? Can work the network to be like, hey, I got this great opportunity or this house, for you. For that person, that person should be, compensated well. I think there's maybe, again, because we're seeing, especially like on LinkedIn, I feel like I'm kind of seeing, I don't want to say disparaging, but just kind of the lower level folks who are just shooting stuff all over the place. I think it gets people so annoyed and so aggressive with the the block button, right? That they might not be open to, when a good recruiting team comes along. So kind of on that note, what would be, if let's say somebody out there is getting that incoming LinkedIn, premium spam or whatever they call it, right? Where it's like, hey, we want to give you that position, but let's say, they are interested in working with a recruiter. I did, before we went live here, I did a Google search for recruiting, and boy, I'm sure a lot of money, probably billions of dollars, is put into the search engine optimization to get, 1-800-recruiter or whatever it is to the top. But maybe are there some like warning signs and positive signs, if you connect with a recruiting agency, maybe you've never heard of them before, but you're wanting to maybe see if, working with a recruiter is right for you. Are there some definite things where you go, like, as a candidate, hey, this is a sign of a good partner to work with, and on the flip side, like, nope, they're just looking to, like, you know what I mean? Just
slam resumes in.
Resumes in and be done with you. Yeah. What advice would you give there?
Yeah. As a candidate, I would ask about the company. Tell me about your company, what you guys do, what capabilities you have, how can you help me as a candidate? Recruiter, how long have you been working with this company? Tell me some of the things that you've done, the types of jobs that you've seen. And I would ask about, hey, you know what? Do you have a relationship with this hiring manager, or is this a job that you just came through, right? It's you don't have that relationship with the hiring manager. I mean, there are jobs like that. There are companies that just have jobs just funnel through, and they don't know who the hiring manager is. They don't know, what specifically that that person, that hiring manager is looking for. So they just want to throw resumes against the wall, right, and see what sticks. That hey, maybe once in 100 resumes, you get an interview out of that. But I would again, this is a relationship that hopefully you want over time. So get to know that individual. If you don't feel comfortable with it, I would say move on, right? I mean, one thing I will say for candidates, give permission to that recruiter, or do not give permission to that recruiter to submit you. A lot of the times, a recruiter that maybe is junior say, hey, Brian called me up. I talked to him for 5 minutes. He has a great background. I'm going to submit him. Well, you never gave that permission to that individual. So, some things that we do too is right to represent. So, Brian, can you give me an email that says that I give you permission to submit you to ABC company? That gives, so we're not submitting you. Other consulting firms aren't submitting you, et cetera. So I always talk to candidates when I did recruit. I don't recruit anymore as much as I used to, but it's one of those things like, can I have your permission, Brian, to submit you to ABC company for this position? Yeah, Stu, you can. Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to reformat your resume to Ambient's format, submit you to it, put a few bullet points together, and talk to the hiring manager about Brian and see if we can get an interview for you on Thursday or whatever that is. So it's a quick connect than just throwing it at a job board and seeing if we can get you an interview.
Yeah.
And we've been, that's one thing we're very prideful of here at Ambient is, again, we have that repeatable business of companies coming to us because we've delivered good people. And in turn, people stick with us because we have those good relationships and good projects. It's just one of those things that we've built over the last 20 some years of being in the industry at Ambient, something that we're very, very proud of.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think what stuck out from that is the sort of that extra professionalism step of, can I have your permission to submit? Not just like, we had a phone call, so you assume that I'm kind of like, just, shoot it up against the wall, whatever sticks. That's that's really awesome. And, when you're mentioning too about asking the recruiter, how long they've been at a company, I feel like that is something I do see quite a bit, with maybe recruiters that I've contacted in the past, is I can see kind of this, little bit of churn. When I look at their LinkedIn resume, it's kind of like, a year at, they're still in recruiting, but it's like, they bounce around a lot. But also I'm like, I look at my IT and security friends, they bounce around a lot too. So I guess would it be to look for to see like, are they staying in recruiting? I mean, would you still feel like if you kind of looked them up, did a little open source intelligence research, you'd be like, okay, well, this recruiter that contacted me, they have had 6 jobs, but it is all in, it's all in recruiting, right? They didn't do recruiting for a year and then go, I'm going to go be a farmer or something like that.
Right. Well, in turn, one thing that we do too is on LinkedIn, when we get people that submit their resume, it sounds great, have been in the industry for, 10 years or they reach out and we go to their LinkedIn profile and there's a way to look at candidates. It's like, well, why did they just post their LinkedIn profile a year ago or 6 months ago? If you've been doing this a long time, you should be on LinkedIn, have a professional, right? So it's we're like, gosh, that looks like a fake profile, so there's a lot of phishing going on too of, hey, a lot of times these companies, they come to us and say, hey, we have great candidates. Yeah, but your candidates are not real either, so they want to work with us. So it's interesting that you can do a little bit of a deep dive to see, hey, are these people real or not? And you just mentioned that. Is this recruiter, hey, they've been doing this a long time, but geez, they move every 6 months. Why would I stick with a company as a candidate or a consultant if they're moving quite a bit? So, my team, I've been with Ambient now. This is my second time with them for over 9 years. Are the recruiters 10 years, 2 or 3 years? So we have longevity, which is great. And that's how you get to know the clients too. You get to know them because we're sitting in on the meetings, understanding their jobs and their projects. And we know the profile that these people are looking for. And that's what I think has kept a lot of my team together, is that we're a fun company too. We're local and we like to have a good time and we have a good culture here. So that's a big part of it too. A lot of these, it's called staffing firms, and we're not a staffing firm, but these staffing firms, it's just putting butts in seats, right? It's
right.
Let's have a 5-minute conversation with Brian. Let's submit his resume over and see what happens. If you're not talking to a person for a good 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes or more as a, first phone call with the candidate and a recruiter, then something smells a little fishy too.
Yeah. And is that thing you said earlier too about making sure the recruiter has a relationship with a hiring manager, is that a potential red flag too? If it's like I'm a candidate and I'm asking those kind of questions about, what do you hear from, when they're looking to hire or asking things that only a hiring manager would know. If the recruiting firm is kind of like, doesn't have that relationship, is that a warning? Because I've heard, and maybe this is another myth, that there can be recruiting almost not really pyramid schemes, but almost like where there's multiple levels of where somebody's feeling
possibly. Yeah, definitely. There's a possibility of that. I think that'd be a great question. Tell me about your relationship with the hiring manager. And if you hear crickets, okay, maybe a flag goes up a little bit, right? Is every job that we have, every position that we have, do we have a relationship with the hiring manager? More than likely we do, but sometimes we don't, right? And we'll tell that to the candidate. Hey, you know what? We've done business with this client for years, but this is a new hiring manager. We don't know them very well, but here's what we understand that they're looking for, right? At least we can talk about it.
Yes.
One question that a candidate should ask is this your end client? And if it's not,
okay,
that's where you go. Okay, so if you're talking to me, and then you're going to submit a resume to another consulting firm that's going to submit it to maybe another consulting firm that will submit it maybe to the end client. There's a lot of layers there. Right. Everything that we do here at Ambient, it's our end client.
Okay. Yep. Right. Then I imagine, right, that would just make math sense to me. If I'm 4 levels deep in the matrix as a candidate, then everybody's getting a little piece of if I do get that job, right? So I'm probably not going to get the nobody's really looking out for Brian to get the best payday in 2 weeks. It's kind of like we've all got a little
and that's the thing too, is we want to pay our consultants a fair rate, hourly rate. If it's if they're W-2 hourly with us or independent with us, we want to make sure that they're being treated fairly when it comes to compensation. Last thing we want to do is say, hey, you know what, Brian left because he could get $5 somewhere else. You know what, we want to make sure that we're paying our consultants a fair market for what they have. And what is fair market? Well, a 1-year security person compared to a 10-year security, there's a big difference in that too, right? But it depends a lot what the client's looking for too. There may be some specialties that, hey, we'll tell the client, we'll educate them. This is going to be a little bit more of a cost to you because you're looking for XYZ technology that is, doesn't exist anymore, like we're working on right now, or it's one of those things where it's so new that there's only a handful of people that have this technology. So it's also educating the client too.
And that's a question I wanted to ask too, is that I've in just all the past however long we've been in business, we'll hear from people who are just like, hey, do you have any positions open, or here's kind of my experience, I'm looking to break into security, or I've been there for 10 years and I'm trying to figure out in a job move, or maybe switching and working with a recruiter to find a role. I'm kind of having a problem putting the right price tag on myself. And it seems like it is just the Wild West in both IT and security side of things, where I've seen some insanely talented people and they'll, share what they make. And I'll just be like, oh, that hurts to hear because it's so low. And then on the flip side, I've been like, you're like 3 years. I mean, you got your CISSP, but you're like 3 years. You're kind of a entry, like SOC, triage alert analyst or whatever, making like, insane amounts of money. It seems like it's completely all over the board. And so when someone's like, help me figure out what I should ask for salary from my next gig, it's hard, because sometimes I'm like, you should ask for $30K more. And then other times I'm like, you're getting paid $30K more than you should.
Yeah, right.
So is there, I don't know. I mean, is there a website? Is there any like general rules of thumb, or maybe like sought after certs or something that you're seeing out there that is like, oh man, people are paying, big bucks for this, or that you would steer candidates to, who maybe should have a few more letters behind their name and a few more, certs kind of stapled to LinkedIn? Or is it just just wild to even start to wrap your head around?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't have a direct answer for you, right? It's all over the board. It really is. I think when I talk to candidates, I always say, okay, where have you been, and what are you looking to do? And compensation wise, what are you looking to make? And then, because when we interview, it's not sometimes for a specific job or a specific project. You may have a great background. We just want to get to know you. Right. And that's part of the thing too. When we're recruiting, we want to say, Brian, tell me about yourself. What are you looking to do? You know what? I don't have anything that really fits what you're looking for right now, but let's keep in touch over the next few months as you're looking at your job search. It's one of those things too, that we have to be educated on. Boy, you know what? At your last job, you were making $30K more than you should have been. Right. And just be honest about it. Right. Whatever that is. And it might be a position where the client's not paying a lot of money, and we'll just say, hey, you know what? This is what you're looking for. It's about and a lot of the stuff that we work on here at Ambient is contract and contract hire. We do some perm and direct hire placement, but not a lot at this point. So we talk about hourly rates, right? You may say, hey, I want to make, I don't know, $50 an hour, or let's just say $70. And I come back and say, well, yeah, you fit this position, but we only can pay you about 55. Are you interested? Yes or no? And it knows an answer. That's an okay answer too. And we'll say, okay, you know what? We'll look for in this range for you for your next position, or we'll go back to the client and say, hey, you know what? We talked to a great person that we think fits the job, but they need a little bit more. So it's just not always, it's never black and white. Let's just put it that way.
Sure.
It's a negotiation game. But we just have to be honest with our candidates and vice versa. We have to say, this is a great fit. We're not going to be able to meet what you need, what you're looking for, or you know what, we can probably pay you a little bit, maybe a couple of dollars more, possibly, right, than what you're looking for, or you're undervaluing yourself too. Here's what in the industry. Here's what it looks like. When people look at coming out of a full-time job, they're at a salary, right? They're making their salary, maybe a bonus, and they may be putting in 60 hours a week and they're making their salary, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people that come out of full time and we talk to them about consulting, what it is, what they, and I've had this conversation with multiple people that have come out of a full-time job and they get into consulting and they're like, I wish I would have done this sooner than waited, because you don't have to go, you have to put up with the politics. You don't have to put up with the, the red tape, all that stuff. Yep. You're there to do a project and a job, right? For 6 months or 12 months or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And you get paid for all those hours that you work. So if you're making, let's say $100K and we can pay you 55 or $60 an hour and you're putting in 45, 50 hours a week, you're getting paid for all those hours. You can make more than what your salary was. And you're not putting up with the other type of stuff that goes on, day to day at a client. So it's kind of a catch-22 and consulting's not for some people, which is fine. That's okay too. Yeah. But as we talk to people and we get to know them, if I treat you well, Brian, I may not place you, but you may know 3 other people that are looking for jobs and say, you know what, Ambient's been great to me. They haven't found me anything, but we have a great relationship. Yeah. Talk to Stu, talk to whoever, at Ambient and see if they can find you something. It's just that good word of mouth type of situation that we want to continue to build.
And I think all those points you just shared are just more positive ammunition towards using a recruiter. You hit on a big one for me personally, because I think if I wasn't doing this, I would give you a call and I'd work and probably be I think do they call them like a serial contractor? I thought I heard that term like years ago, where someone who just really goes from gig to gig, because I'm somebody who loves my work and really on the opposite end sort of hate the politics and the extra stuff. So part of the things I loved about my contract gig, it helped me enjoy the work even more, because like you said, it's like if they did go, hey Brian, would you mind staying after a couple hours? Well, I ended up kind of putting in more 45 to 50 hour weeks, but salary, you're just doing that out of the goodness of your heart. And here it's just like, wow, look at this paycheck. Like this is awesome. And then you see that department and you go, well, I'm so glad that I'll be here a year, right? But it just gets you, I think, in such a healthy mind frame of not going in, not 6 months in going like, I don't think I can do this. I can't retire here. Like, and you already start in your mind, you're checking out, but when you know that you're there for a limited amount of time, plus, use some leverage some resources like yourself to be like, hey, at the end of this year, I know that this is, I'm not going to want to spend a day more here. We can already start working together to have the next thing lined up. But I get what you mean. A lot of people, that just terrifies them. And as somebody who did quite a bit of job hopping in my early days, it just never bothered me, because I just sort of grew up with and maybe my parents made a misstep with this, but they said like, you really should enjoy what you do and not spend too much more time than you need to being miserable. Don't just ride out for 50 years just because you get, maybe you'll get a pension or something at the end, but your unhappiness for 50 years is going to, cost more than, setting all burnt out and tired and, have a heart attack the day you retire kind of thing.
Valid point. I mean, it's one of those things like people when they were full time, right? I mean, a lot of people just worked 20, 25 years at a company,
Yeah.
and they just did, right? There was no moving around every 2 or 3, 4 years. I mean, you bring up a good point of what do we call career consultants, people that have, been consulting for 20 plus years, that they move from project to project to project. And a lot of times, a lot of the things that a consultant will go in, if they do a great job and there's always a need there, those people will get renewed, right? Until there's an end at some point. But we've had people at some clients that have been there consulting for 3-4 years. It started as a 6-month contract. They just get renewed because they're doing such a great job. The company likes them so much, et cetera. They may not have the headcount to bring them on as a full-time employee. Yeah. So that's a beautiful thing. If you can get a niche in there and a hook and stay for a while, that's good for people, right? Yeah, And one thing that we also work on, I mentioned to before, is contract to hire. A lot of people will come to us, a lot of hiring managers will come to us and say, hey, HR has a lot to work on. We need some help in this area. So we want to bring this person as a contract to hire. And it's a great opportunity for the consultant when they're hired are working for Ambient as a W-2 or 1099, to go in and look at the company for 6 months. Is this somewhere I can call home? Is this somewhere where I can continue to flourish and expand my career? Same with the client. The client's going to say, hey, does Brian fit our culture? Does he fit what we're looking for, et cetera? No harm, no foul. If after 6 months, say, gosh, it's not a fit. It's a dating period before you get married, really. I mean, it's one of those things where it's a good thing to kind of get that feel of, do I see myself here having a future? And vice versa. Do I see Brian as a long-term employee? Sometimes they're like, you know what, 6 months wasn't long enough. Let's extend another 6 months to see if there's a match there too. So that's kind of the beauty of contract to hire, is that, they do want to hire somebody. They don't have the bandwidth right now to bring somebody on as a full-time employee, but we need to get the work done. And so that's when that comes into play.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. It seems like I didn't think about it. Certainly seems like it benefits the whoever's hiring too, right? They get to feel you out a little bit. They could also be like, ooh, after 6 months, right? Like, we're not renewing this dude.
No, exactly.
I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier about working with the candidate and kind of getting their resume and sort of formatting it the ambient way. I wanted to ask you some resume questions. It's been a long time for me since I've had to kind of format one and apply places, but maybe we could talk a little bit about best practices, even though it sounds like if someone is working with you kind of have your own magic to format it the right way. But someone who maybe is just out there right now, they're thinking about doing a new gig and maybe they're like me. It's like, man, it's time to dust off the old resume from 10 years ago and start punching it up. What are some of those best practices? I mean, I'm old, so it's like back in my day, it would be like, it'd be 2 pages max. It's just like position, 3 things you did. It better fit into 2 or nobody's going to read it. And then now kind of on the side, I've been sent some resumes and it's like, well, good Lord, this is a small novel. This is like starting with their birth and walking me all the way through, to their hopes and dreams and all that stuff. And then, and sometimes it's paragraphs of things they've done and all that. And I've seen so many vastly different resumes as far as approach and tone and length. And now, of course, there's this whole, well, did a person even write this? Did AI write this? And if so, is that necessarily a bad thing? Or there, all that stuff. Is there keywords that resumes actually absolutely should have these days to help them get through, whatever cloud engine is going to kind of scan and, before they actually get to a person? Or, what I guess, how does a person's resume stand a chance these days to rise above the pile and maybe be seen by human eyeballs?
That's a great question, because I in my career, and I've been doing this such a long time, I've seen a 20-page resume. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? I don't need like it's the novel, right? You said from birth almost like to present day to here's what I'm going to be doing in 10 more years.
Is this Steve Jobs? If it's not, I am not,
I always say the resume is a tool. A resume is a tool to get you an interview. What you were talking about before is like, keywords and stuff. Yeah, that's when, you're submitting a job into a website and they're scraping it, etc. Right. Um, my rule of thumb, and this is just my personal opinion, is I think the more clear and concise and how it fits that specific job is going to be much better. So when we're talking to candidates and I, Mike sends his resume and it's 3 pages long, we'll go through it, and professional summary is huge. The technical skills are big, but then let's talk about the last few positions that he's had. I don't care what you did in 1995, right? That's unless it's a really old technology that's relevant for what we're looking for.
Right.
I don't care.
Right.
So I want a hiring manager is not going to take time to look through 2 or 3 or 4 pages of resume. They just don't. They want a quick snapshot of what can this person do. And that's where we come into play, right? If we're talking to you and we're talking about pen testing and all this other stuff that you want to do, we'll format your resume, and I'll ask you, say, you know what, Brian, there's not much in here about your pen testing at ABC company you just talked about to me on the phone. Can you add a few bullet points to that? Tailor your resume to that specific project or that specific job. And then what we will do is we format your resume, just a nice header of ambient because we're representing you for the job. Yep. And we'll put an email together that has 3 bullet points. Here's why Brian fits this job. Boom, boom, boom. Hiring manager takes a look at that, says, oh, yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking for. They may or may not even look at the resume. But that's where, with us having those relationships with the hiring managers and the relationship with you, we're kind of the matchmaker right now, right? We're not relying on you submitting a resume into a website and having AI or any scraper, pull that. Because even when I post a job on LinkedIn, I get hundreds and hundreds of resumes that aren't even close to what I'm looking for. Yeah. I think that's part of the thing is AI and AI. Even when I go to LinkedIn, they're like, "Oh, Stu, look at this job for you. It's a sales director job." I don't want to be a sales director. It's just like stuff pops up. It's like, just go away. I went in here to look at resumes, not to be like force fed jobs that I'm not even looking. It's crazy. So no, I would say that the more clear and concise you are when you're submitting your resume, whether it is to a website, just tailor it to that job. Tailor it. Use some of those keywords. I would say don't lie about it, but if there's stuff on there you say, oh my gosh, I did that. Well, don't send your general resume in there. Send a resume that says, yeah, I did pen testing at, I don't know, US Bank or wherever it is. I did security.
Yeah.
That's going to do it. But when there's so many people, and I think a lot of the times is that, to me, LinkedIn, a lot of people just hit, oh, you're a good fit for this, submit. And that's where you get all the garbage that comes in. And then we have to filter through it too. So that's why I like when we're talking to candidates such as yourself or other people, let's just have a conversation about what the resume should look like. And you know what, if it is 10 pages, I'm going to cut it down to 2, or have you cut it down to 2. I want you to do the work too, because I don't know your career as much as you do and what you've done. So it's I would say professional summary. And I think, some people still put cover letters. I think that's kind of dying in my eyes, unless it's required. If you're going to send a cover letter to us, we'd probably take some of that stuff out of the cover letter and put it into the email or presentation to the hiring manager. But I don't see many cover letters anymore. I think it's kind of a dying notion at this point.
I was going to ask about that. I was also going to ask just one other resume thing, which was, and again, this was, I'm old, so this was an old piece of advice I got, but I did and have liked it throughout my career, would be to have it kind of at the very bottom, just like a little thing, maybe 3 bullets of like hobbies, interests, as far as like, play guitar, volunteer at church, whatever kind of thing.
Yeah.
I personally like that because when I was on a team that would screen candidates who were going to join our team, a lot of it would be like, hey, yeah, Mike's in the back, he's applying for a job, go talk to him. And I'd be like, oh, shoot. And they'd be like, here's his resume, right? And I loved if I could look down and be like, oh, he's into karate or whatever, right? It gave me a chance to come in, meet him, ask him about, karate, while really getting myself some time to actually scan and read what the heck this guy was about. But then it also gave him a chance to talk about something, that he liked. It kind of put him at ease. And then both of us were more like, okay, cool. Like now we can talk technical.
There's a connection, right?
There's a connection, yeah. But I don't know. In this case, maybe not as relevant, unless I suppose I'm Brian. I'm going to get you're setting me up with an interview. Maybe I get in the door and maybe they do what I did, which is scan the resume. Let's get Brian just kind of relaxed and let's talk about he likes indoor skydiving. Let's talk about that for a few minutes. Then then maybe we'll start drilling them right with the questions and probably can't hurt. Or would you say hard and fast, like just keep your personal life out of it. Just show me you're going to be a hard worker.
To me, it's kind of indifferent. I mean, because sometimes people don't put it on there, and that's kind of awkward of starting an interview and just, oh, hey, how you doing? I mean, some people, for the most part, want to get to know this person too. And I think it's a little bit different too when it's consulting versus permanent, right? Permanent, you want somebody that's going to be there a long time. You want to know kind of their lifestyle, what they do. I mean, within reason, right?
Yeah.
But I talked to a hiring manager. I was filling in with one of my salespeople, and we were just kind of chit chatting. And he was a competitor for American Ninja Warrior, right? I mean, that's pretty cool.
Pretty sweet. Yeah.
We talked about that for 10 minutes. About the training and all that type of stuff too. I don't see a lot of resumes that have those interests or hobbies on there, and typically. In the past, I would just kind of take those off. And again, who's going to read a full resume? A lot of times too is when we're presenting somebody, they may go to your LinkedIn anyway, and just take a look at your LinkedIn. And a lot of people put their hobbies or interests on there too, or activities and stuff like that. So there's ways to find that stuff. But typically, when you're working with a hiring manager, they just want to get down to brass tacks. What can you bring to the table that we're looking for?
Sure.
But
that makes sense.
I'm kind of indifferent when it comes to that. Hey, cool. You're a microbrewer in your house. That's awesome. Let's talk about, the types of beer you like to brew. I mean, whatever it is, or, if I coach AAU basketball and I've coached for years. I don't have that on my resume. If I were to submit anywhere, nobody really maybe doesn't care about that. I don't know. I'm indifferent when it comes to that type of stuff. Sure.
Well, I thought maybe a good place to kind of wind us down with, since you've been doing this for a number of years, is if you had any like really awesome recruiting success story, or maybe even a horror story, just because I'm sure those could be interesting, right? About somebody who shows up whatever wearing completely inappropriate clothes, or biffs the meeting, or crashes and burns.
I have a couple. One wasn't really a horror story. It was with this is when I first started my career. We hired he was a QA analyst, and it was with Kodak, the old film company up in Arden Hills or wherever they were.
Yeah.
And this is back in the day where people actually went in the office and you had to meet them there for the first day and stuff like that. Well, he shows up. The guy shows up in sweatpants. And I looked at him and I said, what's going on? He goes, I wanted to start today, but I have bad kidney stones and I'm wearing sweatpants because I'm comfortable. And I'm like, it's okay. You could have called me and delayed your start, a day or two until these, passed or whatever you needed to do.
Oh my goodness.
And so the hiring manager comes down and she was really cool about it. He said, hey, this is not, he's wearing sweatpants because he has a issue, and she was cool about it. So he started that day, but it was one of those things like, you don't come to work in sweatpants, right? It's just like, what's going on? So that was one of I have another story, but I don't think I can really share it on a podcast about a bad situation. The other one I'm pretty proud of to this day is we had a client, this is probably 15 years ago, that did educational tests for licenses and any type of educational test, and they needed to translate an English version to a language called Urdu, which is a Middle East language.
Okay.
And they're like, we've been looking for this person for a long time. I found the person. They hired him on a contract and actually hired him full time. So they were taking English language tests and they were translating them into Urdu, and they needed somebody to understand Urdu and do that work. So that's one thing I've always, it's like those hard to find skill sets are such a challenge, which is pretty cool, right? And when you place somebody and they do a great job, gives you so much joy in finding jobs for people. The guy was, I mean, he gave me a hug because he's like, this is the best job that I've ever had. These people are great. And it was kind of cool. You know, it's like,
That's awesome.
I think, you know, you're doing your job as a recruiter and stuff. There's always that human element to everything, right?
Yeah.
You're finding good people, you're making the match of good client, good candidate that becomes a great consultant. So that's what's really cool. So there's a couple of stories that I had, the sweatpants guy and the Purdue developer. Yeah.
That's awesome. And do you know the one who's doing the language work? Are they still at it?
No, you know, he left. But he was there, I think, for 5 or 6 years working on that. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I suppose sweatpants guy, do you keep in touch with him at all? Or?
That was about 20 years ago. So I don't even, I mean, he was.
Yeah.
No,
not working.
I don't know.
Right. I don't think Kodak's a thing anymore, is it? Or did they get
no. And the thing is, you know, Brian, what's really interesting is that I've talked to so many people in my career that, you know, I either placed or didn't place. When I go into LinkedIn now, doing this for 24 years, a lot of them are retired, which is great, you know, because I mean, they're, you know, when I'm recruiting them, they're in their 30s, 40s, you know, and you know, that's 24 years later, they're in their 60s and retired. I'm like, that means I've been doing this way too long.
Well, it sounds like I think I mentioned this maybe when we were talking for our very first times, that you seem very positive. You don't seem like I was kind of picturing maybe be just, you know, real weathered and real, you know, bleary eyed and kind of, you know, just pounding coffee, right? Like, oh, these people in their positions and their needs and their, you know, but you seem like you got a real, you know, positive vibe about you and all the work that you do.
Yeah, in this industry, you have to be just a steady. You can't get up too high, too low. I mean, you're not going to survive. Sure. You have to be, because there's good days and there's bad days. It's like any career, right? I mean, you just have to just take it. And this is not really high def camera, so you can't really see all the wrinkles and gray that I
have. Yeah, there's a reason I have the make you look young zoom filter on right now, which, you know, isn't exactly. I try. Well, this has been awesome, Stu. I mean, like I said, if I I'll certainly be holding on to your contact information, because if it doesn't work out with you know, with 7MS, I want to go back to contracting, because I thought it was awesome. And if you know, if people hear this and you know, want to learn more about you and Ambient and stuff, what where should they go? Is there any whatever relevant things they'd want to know about whatever conferences? I don't know if you do any you know, recruiting in like different conventions or any of that kind of stuff that
we do. There's one coming up here, I think in September. It's PMI. It's for project management. It's going to be at the St. Paul College in St. Paul, Minnesota, kind of over by the Capitol. We just attended one, a couple of them for business analysts, and then we also had a Tech Connect that was just recent here in the Twin Cities. So we have some stuff that we set up a table and we talk to candidates, we talk to clients, et cetera. But you can visit our website, ambientconsulting.com. It gives information on what our capabilities are. We work in business transformation, cloud services, application services, data analytics, and then privacy security, kind of what your field is too. So I also can shoot you over my contact information. If they want to reach out to me, and I can assign them to one of our recruiters. If they want to have a conversation with one of our recruiters to get to know them and see what's out there, I'm more than happy to do that too.
Very cool. I'll get all that for you from you, and then I'll have that kind of in our show notes area of this episode, so people can hit 7minutesec.com and just look for this episode, and we'll kind of go from there. But thanks a lot, Stu. Really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate your time, and I hope we get to, you know, I hope this sparks some interesting conversation. I hope we get to do this again, and maybe just you know, whatever, dig into other things too, more AI stuff or more, you know, whatever's on people's mind. But this
absolutely, yeah. Well, I appreciate the time, Brian.
All right, thanks a lot, Stu. Take care.
Talk to you there.
Yeah. You've been watching or listening to 7 Minute Security, a weekly podcast focused on pen testing, blue teaming, and building a career in security.